Hey everybody, you're watching Dr. D's 5-minute lecture series, and today I'm going to be talking about cosmological arguments to prove God's existence. So here we go, starting the timer right now. Now, first thing that we should mention about cosmological argument is that it is what's known in logical terms as an a posteriori argument. In other words, it is an argument based from experience rather than from reason alone. Arguments from reason alone are known as a priori arguments. And so, for example, one could say all bachelors are unmarried. And this would be a good example of a priori, given the fact that it is within the definition of a bachelor to be unmarried. But if we were to say all bachelors have hairy legs, we would need to check maybe a certain sample of bachelors in order to determine whether that was true or not. So when we look at cosmological arguments, we're really looking at a posteriori arguments, or arguments based on experience. And in particular, what we're looking at is arguments about God's existence that look at features of the cosmos. Now, probably one of the, if not the most famous proponent of cosmological arguments is Thomas Aquinas. And Thomas Aquinas had 5 famous proofs for God's existence. And the first 4, in fact, are cosmological. So I'm very briefly going to go through what those are and maybe unpack them a little bit. So Thomas Aquinas' first argument is the argument of motion. Now, according to the argument of motion, he states, number 1, everything that is in motion is moved by something else. Number 2, infinite regress is impossible. And therefore, conclusion number 3, there must be a first mover. Now, what we see here, Aquinas has a particular idea about what motion is. And according to Aquinas, motion is really about moving from a state of potentiality to actuality. And so in order for something to go from a potential state to an actual state, it needs something else that is already in an actual state. Therefore, really, motion, for anything to move around in the world of our experience, it needs something else to get that motion started. Now, given that's the case, if we follow these chains of movement back in the past, what we'll see is that eventually we'll need to come to a first mover. And this is based on Aquinas' second premise, which is infinite regress is impossible. Now, infinite regress is one of those ideas that generally in philosophy, philosophers would like to avoid coming across an infinite regress. And this is the idea that you use something to explain something else, and then you need something to explain that thing, and then that thing, and it'll just keep on going indefinitely without any final point. Now, there are separate arguments about whether infinite regresses are possible or not, but if we just assume for a moment that they are impossible, it means we must have some first mover that got all of this motion going, and that first mover is God for Aquinas. Now, when we look at Aquinas' second way, it's almost identical to his first way, and in form and also in content, but instead of motion, he's going to talk about cause. So Aquinas' second way, we have premise number 1, every effect has a cause. Premise number 2, infinite regress is impossible. And then conclusion number 3, there must be a first cause. And again, God is that first cause. Now, Aquinas' third way is something slightly different, which says some contingent beings exist, number 1, If any contingent being exists, then a necessary being exists. Number 2, therefore a necessary being exists. Now this, of course, is going to hinge on what we mean by contingent being and what we mean by a necessary being. But it seems that I have run out of time. So in my next 5-minute lecture, I'll talk more about Aquinas' argument from contingency, and then also his fourth argument, which is an argument based on this notion of maximum exemplar. So till then, I'll see you later.